We just got the next to last episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Pretty crazy. Next week is the finale. So let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and Marvel way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your take on episode 5 of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And as this is a spoiler review, feel free to spoil away down below in the comment section. No need for spoiler warnings. The way this is going to work is that I'll give my general thoughts on the episode, I'll give my general thoughts on the season, kind of where it stands for me right now, and then I'll talk about some of the specific plot elements in this episode, the stuff that stood out the most to me. With that said, let's get started with my general thoughts on the episode. And I thought this was one of the stronger episodes of the show. We're now 5 episodes in, and I think where this show really shines is when it leans into the character moments. That's what this show has done best for me, is taking these side characters or villains that normally are there to support someone else and then letting us see what's really going on inside of them, what makes them tick. And that's really what this episode was. It's the most character-based episode since episode 1, and in certain ways, probably even more character-based because instead of just setting things up, it's really revealing what's going on inside of them. The tension, the two minds of what's kind of been driving the actions of Falcon as well as Bucky, and each of them kind of confronting each other with those truths of where they're at and pushing the other person to be who they're supposed to be. Likewise, we see John Walker processing through or lying in his own mind, convincing himself, justifying his own actions to himself, driving him further and further down the path that he's been on. And so I think that's what I enjoy most about this show. Therefore, this episode kind of worked for me on a lot of different levels. Now, I don't know if you stuck around, but there's a post-credit scene on this one where you see John Walker putting his own shield together. So you start to see him really kind of forging into, quite literally forging, into that US agent kind of role, in him deciding that path that he's supposed to be on, while no one else really thinks that he should be on that path so much. Likewise, we saw some familiar faces return, kind of looping back on a few different things. We were talking about George St. Pierre. Looks like he'll be a big part of the finale, or the Carl Lumbly character, Isaiah, kind of Sam going back to him, and very much using that conversation to kind of present the worldviews that are kind of going on in Sam's head, and kind of contrasting some things, different perspectives on all of this, and just making what the show's trying to communicate, where it's going, a little bit more clear, and fleshing out those characters, fleshing out the mythology. I enjoy all of that stuff. Then we had Elaine from Seinfeld show up as a lady with a very long name. She's comics Madam Hydra. There's some implications that maybe she's kind of the power broker, but then it also leans heavily into the Sharon Carter's a power broker theory as well. And so you just see kind of these large power players out there, is one way to put it. And I think also certain ways setting up, maybe building towards the Thunderbolts, the Marvel's version of the Suicide Squad, if you want to oversimplify it. And it's just a lot of nice little pieces kind of putting things together. Definitely not a plot-based episode, definitely character-based. And that's maybe why the episode worked a little bit better for me, which will lead us into my thoughts on the season as a whole at this point in time. So if you've been watching my reviews the last couple weeks, you know that I've been frustrated with the show because that through line, the main plot line, I don't find compelling enough for this genre of a show. And essentially, I don't feel like there's enough urgency or stakes when it comes to the main plot line. They're setting up interesting characters. I like sequences. I enjoy the episodes, but the actual main plot line just isn't working enough to pull all this stuff together. And I was able to kind of pinpoint exactly what that was after thinking about it for a couple of weeks and was able to process it. And some people have kind of been suggesting that, you know, oh, not everything needs to have this big, gigantic threat. You know, it's the Thanos fallacy that Thanos was trying to wipe out half the galaxy. Now we feel like everything has to have huge stakes. Well, there's a lot of room between Thanos wants to kill half the galaxy universe or whatever, and these are just people trying to steal medicine to keep people alive. Like, there's a lot of room between these two things. But here's the deal. You have to have a threat. You have to have a conflict that warrants the dramatic actions of our heroes. You have to have some threat, stakes, urgency that warrant bringing in superheroes to do dramatic, interesting things to try and stop it. And I don't think they have that yet. And so what I pieced together was where kind of just the logic didn't work for me is episode 3, right off the bat, they need a lead, so they go talk to Zemo. Fair enough. And then Bucky unilaterally decides he needs to break Zemo out of jail to try and stop the Flag Smashers, which is a dramatic action which will turn them into outlaws and potentially release a very dangerous person out in the world, and it's very personal for him. And he just flippantly did it because it was so important to stop the Flag Smashers. But the Flag Smashers thus far haven't at that point in time, and still, I wouldn't say still don't, justify a big enough threat to warrant Bucky breaking Zemo out of jail, potentially releasing him. Their threat wasn't big enough to justify that action, and that's what I'm talking about. Like, there's a disconnect in it of, like, you have to have something over here with the Flag Smashers that's so bad that it makes sense that Bucky would do something so extreme, so personal, and they don't have that. And so you're like, why do we need superheroes to try and stop displaced refugees from trying to get medical supplies from other people? And I guess eventually, after the end of the episode, then they blow up a building. It starts to get a little bit more personal. They're a little bit more of a threat. It's like, okay, they're killing people. Yeah, I guess we need to stop them. But that came even later. They hadn't done something that made it sense of why they were such a threat that Bucky, of all people, would unilaterally, without even stopping to think about it, break Zemo out of prison. And then even beyond that, that's a dramatic action that turns them into outlaws. And the show has just kind of like shrugged it off like, well, they're Avengers. Sometimes Avengers got to do stuff. I mean, when they broke the law in Civil War, it was this big, gigantic deal that had ramifications. Here, break Zemo out. And Zemo obviously tied to even Civil War. Break Zemo out, and he gets free for a little bit. They have to track him down and catch him. And there's no consequences to Sam or Bucky over this. It just kind of happens. That's that through line logic that I keep mentioning. It's just frustrating me. So this episode didn't bug me because it was not about that. It was about the characters. That's the stuff that works best for me when we're spending time with the characters, getting to know them. And it's that main plot line that I just think there needed something. The Flag Smashers needed to pose some sort of serious threat and make us understand where they're coming from. Help, like, do all the stuff to make it clear. Like, the GRC, they're not doing stuff right either. And the Flag Smashers are being desperate for a good reason, but they're so desperate, they're doing dangerous things and endangering people. Therefore, our heroes need to step. They've only done a little bit to kind of ratchet up the threat level. And now we're going into the finale, and it just doesn't feel like they had enough time to set up a compelling threat. We got one episode left, and this episode was like kind of showing Kari going against her own people. And they're like, hey, shouldn't we tone it down? Like, they've wronged us. Let's go get them. So she goes to New York and apparently going to try and blow up the building or kill all the people in the building or something like that at the GRC. But it didn't spend the time to set that up. It just kind of like, yeah, that's going to happen. And so we've got one episode to get our heroes involved in that story and resolve all of these plot lines, which is so much work to do in one episode while trying to have a compelling threat. And this episode spent so little time even setting up the big threat. Character moments work, main plot line for it. It just feels like an afterthought to this show, which is very strange. My understanding, what I've rumor mill circulation, is that there was originally a plot line about a pandemic and a vaccine, and for some reason they thought that wasn't a good idea and to include in this show in the current climate and setting, so they had to cut that out. And it especially hurt episode 3, where you could tell they were cutting around something. It was very weird the way it was cut, and I think that probably in a lot of ways sabotaged the season as a whole, of removing the threat, the stakes, the danger, and you could tell something is missing at the heart of the show because of that. And I don't know how they're going to set up like a satisfying conclusion when you only have one more episode. This goes back to another thing I've been saying. It just feels like they needed more episodes. And if you'd given us enough episodes, you could flesh out each of these things. You spend an episode dedicated to Bucky and Sam breaking out Zemo, weighing the consequences, realizing they're on the run because of their choices. That's compelling stuff. That's awesome. All these different plot lines about a government trying to balance resources and this group feeling like they're the people that have been at the negative side to that, contrasting that with, racial issues in America. There's a lot of interesting, weighty stuff that you can do with that if you have enough episodes to tell that story in a compelling way. And I don't think 6 was the number. And especially where they decided to dedicate this to be a character episode, which as an episode, it worked. As an episode, it was some of the best stuff I've enjoyed about this show. But it also means we've got one episode left, and I don't think they did enough setup on it. We'll see. We'll see next week. So that's where this show has been frustrating pretty much since episode 3 for me. Of like, I think that they, whether it was in the rewrites that they had to do, the decision to make it only 6 episodes, whatever it was, it's not meaty enough for what it needs to be to tell all the stories they're trying to tell, tackle all the ideas and themes while delivering the MCU action. I think you needed more than 6 episodes to pull that off, and I'm very much feeling that after this episode. All right, to walk through some of the specific things in the episode and kind of talk through what I thought about them, picks up pretty well right off where last week ended, and John Walker is running off kind of like, just like, why didn't I listen to my friend? What did I just do? What just happened? Sam and Bucky show up. They're this is not cool. This is going to end right here. John Walker, it seems like immediately he just buys into his own lies. The lies he's telling everyone else to get off the hook. He believes his own lies, even while he's talking to the two people in the world that really know the best, what really happened. They saw the lead up. They saw the behind the scenes. And he's even lying to them. And of course, they're not going for it. So it leads into a fight where the two of them are just giving everything they can to stop John Walker. He is quite a threat in the process. He destroys Falcon's wings. But between all of it, eventually they're able to like knock him down. And Bucky picks up the shield, walks over to Sam, puts it down next to Sam as the gesture that's kind of been running throughout the whole season of he wants Sam to pick it up. He wants Sam to be the symbol. And so Sam picks it up and like constantly in the moment, like reflecting of like, should I take this? What should I do? But like in the scene, it very visually communicates kind of what's going on inside of Sam of, he has to break down, deconstruct his identity as Falcon to become the new person. So you literally have the guy who's holding the Captain America shield tearing Falcon his wings off, quite literally, setting up the moment for that Captain America to die, Falcon to die, not literally, and this new Sam Wilson, Captain America, to be born out of that moment. And it like visually puts that on display. Kind of leads to then Sam meets up with Torres, his guy that was helping in the first couple episodes that we haven't seen for a little bit. And they kind of have like a debriefing about what's kind of going on in light of the world, seeing what happened with him. And the big thing that's very important in this moment is Sam's wings are destroyed. Torres is like, what happened to your tech? Man, that's all kinds of messed up. And you get to the end of it, and Sam walks off with the shield. Torres says, hey, do you need your wings? And he goes, no, you can keep them, while holding the shield, and walks off. And you see Sam, he's processing that one in his heart. Like, okay, I saw what happened when the wrong guy gets the shield and the symbol. How do I become the right symbol that it needs to be? It's pretty powerful, profound stuff, and visually showing kind of what's going on. And I think that's why, for me, this was one of the strongest episodes. Those moments like that of his character thinking through everything, that's profound for me. The plot is not. The story is not. So Sam, trying to process through this, goes to the one person that would relate on some level to what he's doing. He goes to go see Isaiah. And we kind of fully get the backstory that they didn't even know what was being done to them. They were told, lied about it. Most of them were dying. They were captured. Isaiah's men were captured, and the people working with Isaiah thought that they were just experiments that were just expendable, and they were just going to blow them to pieces. So Isaiah, he goes on his own, breaks them out, saves them. But anyway, they end up dying off because the serum didn't work inside of them. But they want to know why it worked on Isaiah, so they decide that he's just a lab rat, lock him up for 30 years to do tests on him, and all the while didn't let him hear about his wife back home. She dies, held all the letters. Some nice lady eventually writes him off as dead, and he's able to leave. And you kind of get this very dark backstory from everything, all the ways they wronged him, leading to him having this very cynical worldview where he can't see anything has changed in the world, that it's just as bad as it always was. And it kind of leads up to this moment, this brutal moment where he says they will never let a black man be in a Captain America, and no self-respecting black man would ever want to be. And essentially you could see Isaiah verbalizing all of Sam's insecurities, fears, different voices in his head he sees, Steve Rogers, and then he knows the Isaiahs of the world. And it's just the two different versions of Captain America voicing those thoughts in his head. And both of them having compelling reasons to Sam for what is. And you very much see the show clearly articulating what it's been saying in the subtext, and commenting on America's very troubled history with race relations. And you see the show really stating it right now you have Sam trying to wrestle with those tensions of what Steve stood for and the symbol that Steve was as Captain America versus so much of what America has stood for and done and the choices it's made. And that's really at the heart of this show and Sam's arc and what he's working through in all of this. And it's just a very profound, dense scene that packed a lot of punch. So then we have Sam go back to his sister's place, kind of picking up on that plot line, kind of him going back to reality, out of the fantastical stuff, back to normal, to process everything going on. And the community comes together because their family has a good reputation in the area. And Bucky shows up with something that he's got from Wakanda. He turned Zemo over, and they gave him something in this case that he's supposed to give to Sam. Then he was going to leave. He decides to stay. And then he starts kind of helping him train with the shield a little bit, kind of leading to the scene that was very prominently featured in the trailers. But, the first thing we see in the show is Sam turning the shield over. First thing we saw in the trailers was Sam training with the shield. So you knew that this scene was coming eventually. So we get to this moment, and essentially you kind of get both of them putting their journeys out on the table. So you have Bucky essentially apologizing to Sam because he was treating the shield based off what it means for him, never paused to think what the shield and what America mean to Sam as a black man and the implications of all of that. And it was kind of I think it was a nice way to handle it of Bucky's not wrong for trusting Steve. He's not wrong, but up to this point in time, he hadn't really paused to think what he was thinking all of it from his perspective. What does it mean for me if Sam doesn't take the shield? What does it mean for me if Sam doesn't trust what Steve said? But it was never like, what does it mean for Sam? Like, let me try and really understand what's kind of going on in Sam's head, his perspective, and that tension going on inside of him. So he's finally gotten to the moment where it's kind of clicking, like, okay, it's not all about me. It's not all about Steve. What's going on with Sam, and what does all of this mean for him? And then likewise, Sam kind of pushes back on Bucky of like, dude, why are you letting everyone else define you? For decades, you've been defined by other people and Steve's way of doing things and trying to live up to Steve. And what would Steve think? Just be you, man, and go and apologize. Don't make it right. Just go and apologize to him. Like you can't avenge everything, and kind of makes it clear kind of what's going on. And then you have Sam spend a little bit of the episode kind of that training, practicing, trying to do all these flippy type things, throwing the shield that we've seen Steve do many, many times before. Difference being Sam doesn't have the super soldier serum, so it takes him a little bit longer to pick up on all the moves and everything and throwing the shield. And I'm obviously not doing this in order, just kind of telling his story, but it all leads up to the final scene where he's opening up the case and then it doesn't show us what's in the case. And so I would assume that it's a Captain America suit. That's what would seem to be the thing that would make the most sense going into the final episode. What would you want to hold off as a big reveal for the final episode to try and stop the big threat of the season? You have him finally embrace what Steve handing him the shield, all of that. He takes it, accepts it, having gone through the journey of the last 5 episodes, opens the case. Wakandans have built him a suit that's true to his heritage, true to America, all of the different symbols together. Wakanda's making for him. That was the thing that would make the most sense to me. So that's what I'm assuming is in the suit, Captain America suit, designed specifically for Sam, or one of the ones that that Steve used that for some reason would have been Wakanda, whatever that would mean. That's the thing that would seem to make the most sense to me, but it ends on that note. So we have a couple other things kind of going on in the episode. Walker is put before a council who strip him of the Captain America title, tell him that he's going to be dishonorably discharged. The only reason he's not being court-martialed and more isn't happening is because of his record, but in front of a large group of people, very clearly murdered a guy that was surrendering. There's no perspective under which, like, we don't know the circumstances of what happened inside. Like, as bad as they could have been, no matter what, that guy could have just been popping guys off in the head, shooting them in the head. And you come outside and the guy's surrendering with his hands up and you brutally murder him in front of a large group of people. There's just no version of that works out, especially when you are the symbol that is Captain America. That doesn't work very well. So strip him. He doesn't take that very well. He's not good at processing things or being honest with himself or anyone else. So he keeps this narrative in his head. That guy killed Lamar. And that's what he tells his wife. That's what he's trying to tell the council. He goes to Lamar's family and he tells them that. And he's like, yeah, this is the guy that killed him. I avenged him. The guy killed him and I had to avenge him. And he's lying to them, even as they're like, this guy looked up to you. And it's interesting that the nature of it is that his buddy, the guy that seemed to know him the best, also seemed to be totally blind to the darkness in him. And in this moment where his parents the way he's trying to comfort them is in like this lie that he didn't kill the guy that got him. Like, that's not what happened here. This was just an out of control rage killed the wrong person, guy that should have been arrested, but it wasn't the person that was the right person. He's just lying to them as they're talking about how much their son looked up to him. And then it leads to a post-credit scene where it shows him kind of building his own deal, because he, like, in his mind, I have to avenge my friend. I am Captain America. I'm going to avenge my friend. And at no point in time does he stop and reflect on, is this what Captain America stands for? He's just redefined Captain America to himself and his own mission. So interesting stuff. And then, I guess the other one I missed in there, the big gigantic one you have to pause to talk about is part where Lane from Seinfeld shows up, and they told us in advance, there'd been rumors that there's going to be a big cameo that's a celebrity that we know playing a character from the comics, lady with a long name that long history of connections, Madam Hydra, Nick Fury's girlfriend in other senses, a bunch of different stuff. Not an expert. I just know how to use the Google just a little bit. And I think from some of the other articles I read that this might not even been when she was supposed to be introduced because of the order of things changing with Black Widow being delayed so much, in which case it would indicate that they've got big plans for her in the future for what they're going to do with this character and tying different things together wherever this is headed, part of their big Phase 4 master plan. But it was just kind of one of those ones that it just kind of happens and you could tell the Kevin Feige putting all the pieces in place because it doesn't seem like she's terribly concerned with this particular plot of the season. She's very interested in this guy with super soldier serum in his blood for whatever her future plans are. And kind of all along people in rumors and stuff about, is this all building towards the Thunderbolts, essentially version of the Suicide Squad where you get a bunch of Marvel villains. You see if they're building towards that, that's very interesting. And you've got a lot of pieces in place and you can pull from some old stuff too. Abomination is still out there. A guy given a blast of bad super soldier serum that turned him into a Hulk monster. He's out there somewhere. Thunderbolt Ross is the guy that took him. So this is set up literally 13 years ago that they could be heading in this interesting direction. So we shall see where all of this is headed. But I thought that was a nice little touch to, that's always what the MCU's good at, is setting things up, building towards things, introducing things that make you go, oh, well, where is this going? Getting the mind working. So some closing thoughts. It's tough, I think, for me to talk about the show because I think kind of consistently, or not, since after episode 2, it's been disappointing me. It's the plot hasn't been working, and therefore it's easy for me to talk about the negative. I would love to just talk about the positive because there's a lot of things I do like about this show, but it's just tough when that through line I don't think is strong enough for the nature of this show, and there's not enough episodes to flesh it out. Maybe they had to cut stuff because of reshoots and what's going on in the world right now. And so some people, I think, kind of misreading my take on it because I have such big problems with the central through line to it. Like I said, I enjoy individual episodes. I have fun Friday mornings, waking up nice and early to watch this. I just really wish that they'd come up with a better main plot line. That's a big criticism, but doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of other really good things about this show. Keep that in mind whenever I do have my criticisms. Put it in that context. Thank you so much for watching. All my other reviews are right over there. We'll be back next week with my finale review, and then I'll rank the episodes. Not sure what else I'll do, but I'll have plenty of stuff at the end of the season. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.